Welcome to Omega Bonda Stories. Let's begin.
The first time I saw my twin after the accident, his scent was already gone. The room smelled like clean sheets and cold metal, and polite soap meant to hide fear. I stood close enough to touch him, and still my mind refused the truth. We were two halves of one breath for 23 years. Then the world took him and left me holding the half that stayed. Outside the hospital, my phone would not stop vibrating. The messages were from my mother and from lawyers and from the man who managed our family agreements. Every line asked the same thing. Will you do what he can no longer do? My twin had been promised a contract that sounded elegant when spoken aloud. Strategic union. Long-term stability. Underneath it was simple. An Omega for an Enigma Groom. My twin used to touch my cheek at night and tell me he would survive it. He told me someone had to stay so I could leave. I begged him to run with me. He only smiled like he had already chosen. Now he was gone and the contract was still alive. When I reached home, the house was full of quiet that felt staged. My mother sat at the dining table with her hands folded. Her eyes were red, but her spine was straight. The manager stood by the window and spoke like grief was a delay. He said the ceremony is in 3 days. He said the Enigma family has not been told. He said if we fail to deliver the promised Omega, the penalties will crush us. He said our protection will vanish. I said my brother is dead. I said, how can you still speak like this? My mother looked at me like she was drowning. She said we cannot lose everything. She said your brother would not want that. Then she whispered, please. That word broke something in me. My twin carried our family because he believed love meant sacrifice. My mother was asking me to carry what he dropped when he died. I said I am not him. She reached across the table and gripped my wrist. Her fingers trembled. She said you smell like him. She said you can pass if you try. I went to my room and pressed my forehead to the door. I tried to imagine stepping into my twin's life like a coat that still held his warmth. I tried to imagine standing beside an Enigma Alpha and pretending I belonged there. My stomach twisted. In my closet, I found his suit bag. The fabric held the faint ghost of him. I buried my face in it and finally let one tear fall. That night, I listened to the last voice note my twin sent me. His voice was soft and tired. He told me he loved me. He told me I deserved to live without fear. Then he said something that made my lungs stop. He said, if anything happens and they ask you to replace me, do not trust them. Do not trust the groom either. But if you must go, then follow your instincts. They will know what I never learned. 3 days later, I stood in a private fitting room wearing his suit. The mirror showed my face and my eyes and my mouth. It was mine and it was his at the same time. A stylist told me I looked perfect. Perfect meant believable. The car ride to the estate felt like falling. The home rose from the trees like a dark cathedral. The gates opened without sound. The staff moved like ghosts. No one met my eyes. They led me to a room with tall windows. The air smelled of cedar and smoke and something deeper that made my instincts lift their heads. I turned and he was there. I did not hear the door open. He simply appeared in the room like night stepping into light, tall and still and dressed in black. His gaze settled on my throat as if he was listening to my pulse. He did not greet me. He only inhaled once. My suppressants suddenly felt thin. I had tried to mimic my twin's scent with oils and cloth. Yet the moment this man breathed, I felt the lie tremble. He took one step closer, then another. The space between us filled with quiet power. He spoke in a low, calm voice that made my bones vibrate. He said, you are not the one who was promised. My legs went weak. I gripped the back of a chair. I tried to smile. I tried to remember my twin's face so I could wear it like armor. He watched me without blinking. His scent wrapped around the room like a warning and a shelter at the same time. Then he said, tell me who you are. And the door behind him clicked as if the house itself had decided I could not leave. My chest tightened at the sound of the door. I stared at him and tried to find the version of this moment that ends with me walking out. He did not move closer. He only waited. Power was supposed to press. His power simply watched. I swallowed and said my name. Then I said I am his twin. His jaw tightened once. He inhaled again as if my scent confirmed what my mouth had to admit. He said, your scent is close. He said, it is not the same. Heat rose in my throat. I said, I tried. I said, they made me. He stepped to the side and opened the path to the door. It was a quiet reminder that he was not trapping me. The trap was outside. He said, who? I said, to my mother. I said, to our manager. I said, the lawyers. I said, the penalties. I said, they will take our home if I refuse. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, did your twin agree? I nodded. I said he agreed because he loved us. I said he thought sacrifice was safety. He said, when did he die? I said, this 2 weeks ago. I said, I have not slept since. He poured water and set the glass down in front of me. I drank because my throat was closing. He said, the wedding is tomorrow. My pulse jumped. Tomorrow meant vows and cameras and strangers believing a lie. He said, you do not have to do it. Those words landed like light on bruises. I still did not trust them. I asked what happens if I leave. He said, the contract ends. He said, your family will suffer. He said, I can pay and it will not hurt me. Then he said, but it will hurt you. My breath caught. No one else saw that part. I said, you would pay for strangers. He said, you are not a stranger. My instincts stirred and I hated myself for it. I said, you do not know me. He said, I know your fear. He said, your scent carries truth and it does not match the story they gave me. A knock sounded at the door. A staff voice said the planners need confirmation. They said the family is arriving tonight. My phone vibrated. My mother's name lit the screen. A message followed. Do not ruin this. Your brother would want you to finish. My eyes burned. The words felt like a blade. He looked at my face and said, you are shaking. I whispered, I cannot go back. He said, then do not. He opened the door and spoke to the staff in a low voice I could not catch. When he closed it again, the hall was quiet. He said, you will stay in this estate tonight. He said, no one will enter without my permission. He said, in the morning you will decide. He said, I will accept any choice. He placed a thin document in front of me. A temporary protection order with my real name printed in clean letters. My hands shook as I signed. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his gaze sharpened. He said, they are at the gate. My lungs stopped. I pictured my mother and our manager and the hungry relief on their faces when they saw me dressed as my twin. He looked at me and his voice stayed calm. He said, do not speak. He said, stay behind me. The door opened. My mother walked in first. The manager followed. My mother's smile did not reach her eyes. She said, there you are. And the Enigma Groom stepped between us like a wall and said one word that made my blood turn cold. He said, liar. My mother blinked as if she had misheard. The manager tried to speak and his voice sounded thin. He said, the ceremony will proceed. The Enigma Groom did not look at him. He kept his eyes on my mother. His silence stretched until her smile cracked. He said, you walked into my home with a lie. He said, you brought grief into a contract and called it stability. My mother whispered, we had no choice. He said, you always have a choice. Then his gaze found me behind his shoulder. Felt like being pulled into light. He said, I will ask you one question and your answer will decide what happens next. My heart pounded. My mother's eyes begged me to keep performing. My hands shook at my sides. In my mind, I heard my twin's voice telling me to follow my instincts even if I trembled. He said, do you want me to end this now? He waited. No pressure. Only the steady space of a choice. Then he said, tell them your true name. My voice barely worked. I looked at my mother and saw fear behind her eyes. I looked at the manager and saw only numbers. Then I looked at the Enigma Groom and felt the strange quiet safety of his presence. I said my true name. The words fell into the room like a stone. My mother gasped and tried to smile through it. The manager started talking fast. He said, grief causes confusion. He said the contract names an omega. He said the ceremony is tomorrow and the guests are arriving. The Enigma Groom lifted one hand. Not a threat. A boundary. The manager stopped. He said, leave. My mother whispered, please. She said, we will lose everything. He said, you will not lose what you should never have offered. 2 guards appeared at the doorway like they had been waiting for his permission. They moved with polite firmness. My mother reached for me as she passed. Her fingers brushed my sleeve. She whispered, "Do not do this to us." The door closed. Silence rushed back in. I stood very still and tried to breathe. He said, "Sit." I sat because my knees were shaking. He crossed to a small table and set a clean cloth near my hand. He did not touch me. He did not step into my space. He only offered something soft and waited. I pressed it to my eyes. The gentleness cracked me open. My breath broke. Grief poured out like it had been waiting for permission. I said, "I am sorry." I said, "I did not want to deceive you." He said, "I knew." I looked up. My throat felt raw. He said, "Your scent told me." He said, "Your eyes told me." He said, "You carried death like a weight that did not belong to you." I whispered, "Then why did you let me come here?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you were brought here like a sacrifice." He said, "I needed to know if you wanted to be saved or if you wanted to keep burning for people who would never stop taking." The truth of it hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the chair. I said, "I do not know how to stop." He said, "He will learn here." I tried to steady my voice. I said, "If the wedding ends, the penalties will destroy my family." I said, "My twin died carrying this contract. If I run, I feel like I am leaving him alone on the ground." His expression shifted for the smallest moment. Something like sorrow crossed his face and vanished. He said, "Honoring him does not mean erasing you." My eyes filled again. He said, "I will offer you two paths." He said, "We can cancel everything and I will cover every penalty." He said, "We can proceed and you will be protected under my name." He said, "Either path is yours and not theirs." Choice again. The word felt unreal. I said, "If we proceed, then everyone will call me his name." He said, "Then we do not let them." He said, "If we proceed, you will stand beside me as yourself." My pulse jumped. Standing beside him in public as myself sounded impossible. It also sounded like the first honest thing I had been offered since my twin died. I asked, "What do you gain?" He watched me for a long time. Then his voice lowered. He said, "I gain the right to protect the Omega my instincts recognized." My skin warmed with fear and something quieter. Slow burn means you do not trust the pull. Slow burn means you watch it and you wait. I whispered, "I am afraid." He said, "I know." He moved one step closer and stopped. That measured distance felt like respect. He said, "You will sleep here tonight." He said, "You will be safe." He said, "In the morning you will tell me your decision." Then he added one more sentence that made my heart stumble. He said, "I will not let anyone use your scent without your consent." Consent. In his mouth it sounded like law. He turned to leave. At the doorway he paused and looked back. His eyes held mine with quiet intensity. He said, "Your true name suits you." A small part of me felt seen for the first time since my twin died. It felt like stepping into a warm light and realizing I had been cold for years. I didn't know it then, and my heart wasn't ready to accept what my instincts were screaming, but something had already shifted between us, and there was no going back. If you're feeling what I felt in that moment, then you understand why I need you to stay with me through this journey. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when he finally breaks his silence, because I promise you it will shatter everything you thought you knew about us. After he left me alone, the house went quiet again. I lay in the bed they gave me and listened to my own heartbeat. Sleep came in thin pieces. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my twin's face and my mother's hands on my wrist. Morning arrived with pale light and the scent of coffee. I stood by the window and watched cars arrive through the trees. Guests, planners, security. Today was here. A soft knock came. I said, "Come in." He entered without sound. He wore a dark shirt with sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked almost ordinary until his gaze met mine and the room answered him. He said, "Did you decide?" My mouth went dry. I remembered the two paths: cancel and pay, proceed and be protected. I said, "If I proceed, I will not pretend to be him." I said, "I will not let anyone call me his name." I said, "I will not be displayed like proof of a deal." I said, "If you protect me, then you protect my truth." He listened. Then he nodded once. He agreed. The certainty of that word made me sway. He held out a small card, a statement for the press. It said the union will proceed with transparency. It said the spouse will be addressed by his true name. It said any harassment will be treated as a security threat. I stared at it. He was using power as a shield instead of a cage. The ceremony room was full of light and flowers and people who smelled like money. I walked down the aisle in my twin's suit and felt my skin scream at every gaze. The Enigma Groom waited at the front. He did not smile. His eyes stayed on me like a fixed point. When I reached him, he offered his hand and waited. I placed my fingers in his palm. The contact was brief and controlled, yet it steadied me like a promise. The officiant began to speak. The Enigma Groom interrupted with calm authority. He said my spouse will be addressed by his true name. Whispers raced through the room. My mother's face went white. He turned slightly toward me and lowered his voice. He said it. My throat closed. My voice shook. I said my name. He repeated it in front of everyone, clean and firm. He did not flinch at the shock around us. He did not look away from me. At that moment, the crowd became distant. The only thing that mattered was the way he chose my truth without hesitation. When it was done, he guided me through a side corridor into silence. Security closed the door and the world became muffled. He said, "Breathe." I did. The air trembled in my lungs. He said, "You did well." Praise should not have mattered. It did. It made something in my chest loosen. On a chair in the private room, my twin's jacket lay folded. My hands moved before I thought. I reached into the inner pocket and felt paper. An envelope. My twin's handwriting covered the front. It was addressed to me. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a short note. It said, "If you are reading this, then I could not keep you out of the storm." It said, "The Enigma is not your enemy." It said, "His silence is the safest place I ever stood." It said, "Trust your instincts more than my sacrifice." My breath caught. My twin had known him. My twin had trusted him. I lifted my head slowly. The Enigma Groom was watching me. His expression did not change. Yet something in his eyes looked older than before. I whispered, "Did you know my twin?" He held my gaze. The room suddenly felt too small. Then he said yes. And he said he came to me first. My chest tightened. I said, "Why would he come to you?" He said, "Your twin came late one night without lawyers." He said he asked for a private meeting. He said he did not ask for himself. He asked for you. He said your twin knew your family would use you if they ever ran out of options. He said he wanted someone stronger than their fear to stand between you and the contract. I asked what he promised. His eyes stayed on mine. He said, "I promised I would never claim an Omega who did not choose it." He said, "I promised I would protect you if the storm reached you." He said, "I promised I would honor your true name." Then he said, "There is more." I froze. He said, "Your twin's death does not fit what I was told." He said the report was too clean and the timing was too convenient. He said someone wanted the contract to change hands. I whispered, "Are you saying he was taken?" He said, "I am saying we are not safe yet." His words about being unsafe stayed in the air like smoke. I held my twin's letter and tried to understand how grief could turn into danger so quickly. I had replaced my dead twin to protect my family. Now it seemed someone had wanted that replacement. That night, he did not leave me alone with the noise. His security screened every call. My mother tried again and again. The manager's messages turned sharp. I did not answer. For the first time, I let the boundary stand. When he returned, his eyes were calm and hard at once. He sat across from me with space between us. He said, "Your manager sold information about your twin." He said he told an outside group that the Omega might die before the ceremony. He said they planned to push the contract onto you because you would be easier to control. My hands went cold. I wanted to say it was impossible. Then he slid a folder toward me. Payment records. Messages. A signed statement from an assistant who finally chose truth over fear. The evidence was simple. That was what made it cruel. I whispered that my twin was scared. He paused. Then he said yes. He said he was scared for you more than for himself. Something inside me broke in a quiet way. I pressed my knuckles to my mouth and tried to breathe. He said, "I am sorry." No one had apologized to me since the hospital. Everyone else had talked about consequences and optics. Hearing sorrow from him felt like warmth in a cold room. He said, "We will file charges." He said, "The manager will never control you again." He said, "The outside group will be exposed." He said, "My security will protect you until the threat is finished." I asked about my mother. My voice sounded small. He said she will be safe. He said she will also learn that fear does not excuse using you. Then he stood and said there is one decision that belongs only to you. He said we can annul this marriage when the legal steps are done. He said you can leave with your name intact and your future open. He said if you stay it will not be because you owe me. He said it will be because you choose to. My pulse moved like a wave. I had been taught that attachment keeps an Omega alive. I had also been taught that attachment means losing yourself. He was offering protection with choice. I looked down at my hands. I thought of my twin and the way he carried our family so I could breathe. I thought of the way this Enigma Groom repeated my true name in front of everyone without hesitation. I thought of the calm in his voice when he said consent like it was law. I said I want to stop running. He did not smile. His eyes softened by a fraction. He said then we go slowly. The next morning he drove me to the cemetery quietly. The sky was pale. The wind smelled of winter and stone. We stood in front of my twin's grave and the world felt small. I knelt and spoke to the name carved into the stone. I told him I was sorry. I told him I missed him so much it hurt to breathe. I told him I was trying to live with the half he left me. When I stood again, the Enigma Groom was still beside me. He did not touch my shoulder. He did not offer words that would sound false. He simply stayed. Then he spoke softly. He said, I will keep the promise I made to him. He said, I will protect you until you can protect yourself. He said, I will not rush you. He said, if you choose me one day, it will be because you are free. Trust did not arrive like lightning. It arrived like a breath returning after a long hold. On the drive back, he asked if he wanted to go home. Home caught in my throat. I looked out at the passing trees and heard my twin in my mind. Follow your instincts. I said yes. And when we reached the estate, I stepped inside with my true name still intact and my fear a little smaller than before. That's how my world changed and how I found home in the last place I expected. If this story made you feel something deep and real, then I create these emotional worlds every single week for hearts like yours that crave connection that goes beyond words. Subscribe so you never miss the moment when two broken souls find each other in the darkness. Your support means everything, and it lets me keep bringing you stories that understand what you're searching for. Hit that subscribe button and let's feel everything together because you deserve stories that see you.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more emotional stories.